Luke's backyard was the perfect place for a campout. Nestled against a sprawling forest, it seemed like something out of a movie. Towering trees with gnarled branches, the scent of pine hanging in the crisp air, and a vast stretch of nature untouched by civilization. Luke's friends, Ryan, Silas, Wilson, Connor, and Judah, were all eager to spend the weekend there, a break from the monotony of school and small-town life. The boys spent the first part of the day setting up their tents, unpacking snacks, and cracking jokes. By noon, they were exploring the forest, following trails that disappeared into dense foliage. They climbed trees, skipped rocks at the small creek running through the woods, and told exaggerated stories about creatures that supposedly lurked in the shadows. Yet as the day wore on, something felt off. It started subtly, a rustle in the bushes when the wind wasn't blowing, shadows that seemed to shift without explanation, and the eerie sense of being watched. "Probably just a possum," Luke had said, brushing it off. The others agreed, though uneasily. By the time dusk fell, the feeling of being watched had become almost unbearable. Judah, the most skeptical of the group, laughed it off nervously. "You guys are just psyching yourselves out," he said, though his eyes kept darting toward the darkening trees. They built a fire, the flickering flames casting long shadows that danced across the tents. Conversation was forced, their laughter strained. When the stars finally came out, Connor suggested they play hide-and-seek in the dark to distract themselves. "I'm not going in there at night," Ryan said, eyeing the forest. "Not after today." "Come on, it'll be fun," Luke urged. "We'll pair up. Besides, we've been all through there in daylight. It's no different now." Reluctantly, everyone agreed. They drew sticks to decide the teams. Silas and Ryan were the seekers, armed with flashlights. Luke paired with Wilson, while Judah teamed up with Connor to hide. Luke and Wilson crept into the woods, whispering and trying not to laugh as they stumbled over roots. They eventually settled behind a fallen log, pulling a camouflage tarp over themselves. "Think they'll find us?" Wilson asked. "No way," Luke replied. "This spot's perfect." Meanwhile, Judah and Connor went deeper into the woods, further than they had intended. Connor insisted they would have the best hiding spot if they just kept going. Eventually, they found a hollowed-out tree trunk large enough to crouch inside. "This is perfect," Judah whispered, though his voice quivered. Back at the campfire, Silas and Ryan counted loudly to 100 before clicking on their flashlights and heading into the woods. They kept their beams low, scanning the ground for footprints. "I hate this," Ryan muttered, shivering. "It feels wrong." Silas nodded, but he didn't respond. He didn't want to admit it, but he felt the same way. The woods were unnaturally quiet, the kind of silence that made your ears ring. Luke and Wilson, still hiding under their tarp, froze when they heard it. A low, guttural growl that seemed to vibrate the air around them. It wasn't loud, but it was enough to make Wilson grip Luke's arm tightly. "Did you hear that?" Wilson whispered. Luke nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. The growl came again, closer this time. They peered out from under the tarp, their eyes straining in the darkness. A figure was moving between the trees, its silhouette unnatural and wrong. It was tall, much taller than any human, and its limbs were elongated, almost spider-like. Its movements were jerky, as if it didn't quite know how to control its own body. Wilson started to scream, but Luke clamped a hand over his mouth. The creature turned its head, revealing glowing, pupil-less eyes. They didn't dare move, barely breathing as it stalked past them. Deeper in the woods, Judah and Connor were huddled in their tree trunk when they heard soft, wet footsteps approaching. They peeked out cautiously, expecting to see Silas or Ryan. Instead, they saw it. The creature was dragging something behind it, something that looked horrifyingly human. Its pale, translucent skin glistened in the moonlight, and its face was a grotesque amalgamation of features that didn't belong together. It let out a shrill, clicking noise that made both boys' stomachs churn. Connor pulled Judah back into the hollow, clamping a hand over his own mouth to stifle a gasp. They both sat frozen, praying it wouldn't notice them. But the creature stopped, sniffing the air like a predator catching a scent. Silas and Ryan weren't having much luck finding anyone, at least not anyone they wanted to find. Their flashlights flickered as if the batteries were dying, though both had been fully charged. The forest seemed to stretch endlessly, far larger than it had been during the day. "What the hell is that?" Ryan whispered, his flashlight catching a glimpse of something pale in the distance. Silas raised his own light, but the creature vanished before he could get a clear look. "We need to go back," Silas said, gripping Ryan's arm. "Now." Before they could turn around, the creature's shrill clicking echoed through the woods, closer than it had any right to be. The boys broke into a sprint, abandoning their flashlights as they ran blindly through the trees. The following day, the boys swore they would never return to the forest. They all agreed on one thing: they needed to get as far from Luke's backyard as possible. Still shaken from the previous night, they hatched a new plan: camp out at a lake near Luke's house, a scenic spot about 10 minutes away, surrounded by rolling hills and open water. By early evening, they piled into their cars, each one a trusted companion in its own right. Ryan's Nissan Murano, lovingly nicknamed Murray, led the way. Behind him was Silas's sleek black Honda Accord, Sabrina, and Luke's slightly older but reliable silver Accord, Olivia. The cars hummed along the winding road, and the boys felt a faint sense of relief as the familiar forest faded in the rearview mirrors. When they arrived at the lake, the air was crisp, the water calm, and the setting sun painted the sky in fiery hues of orange and red. It felt peaceful, too peaceful in fact. The boys quickly set up a small camp near the shore, far enough from the waterline to avoid the damp but close enough to enjoy the view. They dragged logs together for a makeshift seating area, built a fire, and broke out their stash of marshmallows and snacks. For a while they almost felt normal again, laughing as they recounted old stories and roasted s'mores. But as darkness crept in, the unease from the previous night returned. The lake, once picturesque, seemed to transform into a black void. The far end of the water was swallowed in shadows, and the moon's reflection rippled eerily across the surface. "What's over there?" Connor asked, pointing to the far side of the lake. "Just trees," Judah replied, but even he didn't sound convinced. The laughter stopped when they noticed movement at the far end of the lake. It was subtle at first, a faint ripple that broke the otherwise still surface. Then something emerged, a dark, towering figure. Its silhouette was massive, with elongated limbs and a head that seemed to twist unnaturally. It stood at the edge of the water, unmoving, as if watching them. "What the hell is that?" Ryan whispered, his voice barely audible over the crackling fire. The figure took a step forward, its legs plunging into the water. It didn't hesitate. It moved deeper and deeper until it vanished beneath the surface. For a moment the lake was still again. Then came the sound, an unnatural, high-pitched screech that echoed across the water, followed by a furious splashing. The ripples turned to waves as something massive surged beneath the surface, heading straight for them. "It's swimming!" Silas yelled. "It's coming this way!" The boys scrambled, grabbing flashlights and shouting over each other. The creature moved impossibly fast, a dark shadow cutting through the water like a torpedo. Its glowing eyes breached the surface for a moment, locking onto them before disappearing again. "Get to the cars!" Luke shouted. The boys sprinted, abandoning their campsite. Ryan dove into Murray, pulling Judah and Connor in behind him. Silas and Wilson bolted for Sabrina, slamming the doors shut just as the creature's screech echoed again. Luke ran for Olivia, fumbling with the keys as he threw himself into the driver's seat. They locked the doors, hearts pounding, and threw blankets over themselves, hoping to hide. The creature reached the shore moments later, its massive form pulling itself out of the water. Through the fogged windows of their cars, the boys caught glimpses of it in the moonlight. Wet, sinewy limbs and a body that seemed to shimmer unnaturally, as if it weren't fully solid. The creature prowled the shoreline, its movements slow and deliberate. Then it let out a guttural growl and slammed one of its massive limbs onto the hood of Murray. The boys inside stifled screams, shrinking deeper under their blankets as the creature's claws scratched the windshield, leaving deep gouges in the glass. "Inside, Sabrina," Silas whispered to Wilson. "What do we do? We can't just stay here." Wilson shook his head, his face pale. "If we run, it'll get us." Meanwhile, in Olivia, Luke gripped the steering wheel tightly, watching as the creature circled the cars. It seemed to be testing them, its glowing eyes peering into each vehicle as it moved. It paused briefly in front of Olivia, its head tilting as if studying Luke through the glass. Then it turned and vanished back into the water. For a moment, there was silence, broken only by the boys' labored breathing. But just as they began to think it was over, a loud thud echoed from beneath one of the cars, then another and another. The boys realized with mounting dread that the creature wasn't gone. It was underneath them. The boys didn't have time to think, only to act. The second the heavy thud beneath Murray rattled the frame, Ryan, Luke, and Silas simultaneously turned their keys, engines roaring to life. "Go, go, go!" Luke shouted, throwing Olivia into drive. The cars peeled out of their makeshift campsite, tires kicking up dirt and rocks as they sped onto the dark country road. Through their rearview mirrors, they saw the creature emerge from the shadows. Its long, sinewy limbs propelled it forward with horrifying speed, its glowing eyes locked onto them. The boys screamed in unison as the creature began to close the distance. "It's keeping up!" Judah yelled from the back seat of Murray, gripping the headrest in front of him. Ryan floored the gas pedal, his hands gripping the wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. The creature let out a guttural screech, and Ryan saw it lunge in the rearview mirror. The thing was impossibly fast, its limbs stretching and retracting in ways that defied physics. In Sabrina, Wilson screamed, "We're going 90 and it's still gaining. What is that thing?" "Something we're not dying to find out," Silas shouted, weaving the car sharply to avoid a pothole. From the lead car, Olivia, Luke's voice crackled over the walkie-talkie they'd hastily grabbed before leaving. "Guys, we need to do something or we're screwed. Ryan, didn't you say something about—" Ryan cut him off, slapping the dashboard of Murray. "I knew you'd thank me for this one day. Buckle up, boys." He pressed a button next to the stereo, and with a mechanical whir, a panel slid out from the roof of Murray. A large makeshift cannon, crafted from scrap metal and duct tape, rose into position. "Ryan, what is that?" Judah yelled, practically climbing into the front seat. "It's my custom Murray blaster," Ryan said proudly. "Shoots high-pressure paintballs filled with pepper extract. Don't ask why." "That thing is homemade?" Connor screamed from the passenger seat. "You're gonna blow us up!" Ryan ignored him, steering with one hand and using the other to aim the joystick controlling the cannon. He lined up the creature in the crosshairs and fired. A volley of glowing neon green paintballs exploded onto the road and splattered across the creature's body. The creature reeled, letting out an ear-splitting screech as the pepper extract did its work. For a moment it slowed down, shaking its elongated limbs as if trying to rid itself of the burning paint. From Sabrina, Silas yelled into the walkie-talkie, "Hell yeah, Ryan, now it's my turn!" He flipped a switch on his console, and panels on either side of Sabrina slid open, revealing a pair of side-mounted airsoft guns. "Silas, why does your Honda have guns?" Wilson shrieked. "It's Sabrina. She's classy and deadly." Silas grinned as he let the side guns loose. A rapid barrage of plastic pellets pelted the creature, making it stumble. "Did you both mod your cars into death traps?" Luke's voice crackled through the walkie. Ryan cackled. "We all have our hobbies. What about you?" Luke hesitated, then smirked. "You're about to find out." From the back of Olivia, a panel in the trunk popped open, revealing a rack of tranquilizer darts. A mechanical arm slid one into a launcher mounted on the rear of the car. "Luke, why does your Accord have tranquilizers?" Judah asked over the walkie. "For bare emergencies," Luke shouted, steering wildly as the creature began to gain on him again. "Or, you know this, fire." The dart shot out, whistling through the air and striking the creature square in the chest. It stumbled, letting out another deafening screech, but kept running. "It's still coming," Connor yelled from Murray. "Then we hit it harder," Silas said, unloading another volley of pellets. The cars swerved and zigzagged down the winding country road, their weapons firing in tandem. For a brief moment it seemed like they might win. The creature began to falter, its movements less coordinated, its glowing eyes flickering. But then it leapt, an inhuman, monstrous leap that covered dozens of feet in an instant. The boys barely had time to react as the creature lunged directly at Olivia. Its claws latched onto the trunk, and Luke felt the car jolt violently as its tires skidded across the pavement. "It's on me!" Luke screamed into the walkie, yanking the wheel to try and shake it off. The creature climbed onto the roof, its grotesque limbs cracking the windshield. Luke swerved hard, sending Olivia careening off the road and into the dark country plains. The last thing he saw before losing control was the creature's glowing eyes staring directly into his. The car spun out, dirt and grass flying as it plowed into the field. Over the walkie, Silas's panicked voice screamed, Luke, hold on! Olivia came to a grinding halt, the engine sputtering. The creature's screech echoed through the night as it tore into the roof of the car. Inside, Luke fumbled with his seatbelt, his breaths coming in short, terrified gasps. And then the walkie crackled again. "Luke, we're coming for you!" Ryan shouted. But Luke knew it was too late. The last thing he heard was the sound of metal ripping and the creature's guttural growl as it descended upon him. The walkie went silent. The screech of tearing metal echoed into the night, filling the air with a chilling sense of finality. Inside their cars, Ryan, Silas, and the others froze in horror as Luke's voice abruptly cut off from the walkie-talkie. "Turn around!" Silas shouted, slamming the brakes on Sabrina. The tires squealed as he pulled a 180 on the narrow country road, dust flying in the beams of his headlights. Ryan's Murray and the battered Sabrina roared after him, their engines screaming against the night's silence. "Luke's not going out like this," Ryan yelled into the walkie, his voice a mix of panic and determination. Judah and Connor were wide-eyed in the back seat, their fear silencing any protests. The cars sped across the uneven plains, their headlights cutting through the moonlit darkness. In the distance they saw Olivia sitting still, her hood crumpled and steam rising from the engine. The roof was torn open like a tin can, and Luke was nowhere in sight. But the creature was there. It stood on all fours now, its elongated limbs bent and quivering. Its glowing eyes stared directly at the oncoming cars, its head cocking unnaturally as it let out a shrill, otherworldly howl that made every hair on their bodies stand on end. "What's the move?" Wilson shouted from Sabrina, clutching the dashboard as Silas floored the gas. "We hit it!" Silas shouted back. "Are you crazy?" Wilson screamed, but Silas didn't waver. "Ryan, Silas, flank it!" Judah shouted from the back seat of Murray. "We'll draw its attention. Just don't miss." Ryan gave a grim nod. "You got it." He twisted the joystick controlling Murray's blaster cannon, locking onto the creature. As Murray and Sabrina closed in, the creature lunged toward them, its grotesque body moving with a horrifying speed and agility. It leapt high into the air, landing with a deafening thud directly in front of Ryan's car. "Brace yourselves!" Ryan shouted as he fired the cannon, a barrage of glowing paintballs pelting the creature. It reeled back, shrieking, but then swiped one of its elongated claws across the hood, leaving deep gashes in Murray's metal. Silas swerved Sabrina to the left, activating the side guns. The airsoft pellets peppered the creature's side, driving it back toward Olivia. For a moment, it crouched low, its glowing eyes narrowing as if calculating its next move. "Where's Luke?" Judah yelled, frantically scanning the area. "There!" Connor screamed, pointing to a shape crawling away from the wreckage of Olivia. Luke was dragging himself through the tall grass, his face bloodied but alive. The creature noticed him too. It turned with a snarl, its limbs stretching unnaturally as it prepared to pounce. "No, you don't!" Silas yelled, jerking the wheel. Sabrina plowed into the creature's side, sending it sprawling across the ground. Ryan slammed the brakes, throwing open Murray's door. "Judah, Connor, grab Luke. We'll cover you." Judah and Connor bolted out of the car, sprinting toward Luke. The creature recovered quickly, its screeches cutting through the air as it clawed at the dirt to rise. Silas whipped Sabrina around, firing another volley of pellets. The creature let out a guttural roar, lunging for the car. It latched onto the side, its claws tearing at the frame, but Silas jerked the wheel hard, throwing it off balance. Meanwhile, Judah and Connor reached Luke, dragging him to his feet. "We've got you, man," Judah said, adrenaline surging through him as they half-carried, half-dragged Luke back toward the cars. "Hurry up!" Ryan shouted, firing another barrage of paintballs. The creature, enraged and covered in glowing paint and welts, turned its attention back to the boys. It bounded forward, its limbs propelling it at an impossible speed. "Not so fast," Luke croaked, barely able to speak as he reached Murray. He stumbled into the back seat, grabbing the walkie from Ryan. "Tranquilizers! Silas, line it up!" Silas whipped the car around, skidding to a stop just in time for Ryan to fire another round, forcing the creature back. Luke loaded a dart into Olivia's launcher from the wreckage, attaching it to the side of Murray's roof. "Hold it steady!" Luke yelled. Ryan hit the brakes as Luke took aim. The creature lunged again, its glowing eyes locked onto them. Luke fired, The dart hit the creature in the chest. It shrieked, its body convulsing as it tried to pull the dart out. For a moment, it seemed as if it might shake it off, but then its limbs faltered. It stumbled, its glowing eyes flickering before it collapsed in a heap in the grass. The boys didn't waste any time. They loaded Luke into Murray, all of them pale and shaking as they turned their cars back toward the road. No one spoke as they drove in a convoy, the once familiar country roads now feeling endless and hostile. When they finally stopped, it was at a rest area miles away. Too shaken to go home, they parked their cars in a tight circle and spent the rest of the night huddled under blankets, dozing off in fits of exhaustion. When the sun rose, the terror of the night before seemed distant, like a bad dream. But as the boys stepped out of their cars, they froze. Olivia stood pristine, parked perfectly on the gravel as if nothing had happened. No dents, no scratches, no broken glass. Murray and Sabrina were the same, spotless, untouched, with no sign of damage or modifications. "What the hell?" Ryan whispered, walking in a daze around his car. "It's like it never happened," Silas said, his voice trembling. The boys looked at each other, their faces pale. Judah glanced toward the horizon, where the distant forest and the lake loomed in the morning mist. "We need to leave," Luke said finally, his voice hoarse. "And never talk about this, ever." No one argued.